This is the brand new Arrma Quake Grom, and this isn't just a granite Grom with a different body because under the hood, there are a lot of new parts. There's enough new in here to consider this thing a completely different vehicle, or at least a V2 of the Grom. Let's check it out. First of all, I have to say this truck looks really awesome, and is probably one of the coolest looking minis we've ever seen. Anybody who's familiar with the new 1/10 scale Quake will find this body to be immediately familiar, just smaller, as it is a near perfect scaled down reproduction of that 1/10 scale body. To take a closer look at it, we need to remove it from the chassis. We do that with a button in the rear in the tailgate and another button hidden here in the front. Push those two and the body comes right off. Like the 1/10 scale version, we've got a nice hard plate in the front as well as a tailgate protector. Unlike the 1/10 scale version, this has a spine that goes all the way down the middle and really reinforces the whole body, including two posts that go up and protect the roof. However, there is no skid plate on the roof, which I really would like to see. Interestingly, it almost looks like there's a place for a screw to go through here, so I wonder if they're going to have a skid plate accessory at some point in the future. If not, I'm sure someone will come up with a 3D printed one. The paint has a really nice matte finish underneath the body for most of it, and then some gloss details here. I think it looks great, though the front and rear might be a little bit polarizing with this kind of rock texture on the skids. Being a smaller scale, I think it pulls it off a bit better than on the 1/10 scale body, but like anything related to looks, whether or not you like it is going to be a personal choice. Underneath, those body mounts are brand new. We've got a button in the front and a button in the back that are both spring-loaded. They activate a little tab in here, and those tabs lock into posts in the front and in the rear of this brand new chassis. The polycarbonate on this body feels medium thick, and with this spine in the middle and all the support, I think this thing's going to hold up really well to bashing, which of course we're going to put to the test when we try this thing out in stock form, then add a lot more power to it. But of course, while that body looks cool, it's what's under the body that's really got me interested. This thing is completely different from a standard Grom. These tires look really cool. I love the classic chevron tread pattern. They've got a fairly small looking wheel on the outside, which is larger on the inside. This is to clear suspension and steering components. The tires do not have foams in them, but the tires themselves are vented, not the wheels. This is a really great feature because if any debris or moisture gets in there, it gets slung right back out by centrifugal force. If you have the wheels vented but not the tires, anything that gets in there is going to stay in there. It'll cause imbalance in the wheels and all kinds of other problems. At about 78 millimeters in diameter and 46 millimeters in width, these are a little bit bigger than the Granite Grom tires, though they do have the same 12 millimeter hexes, which means there are going to be plenty of options for upgrades, including these quite a bit larger Proline 2.2 trenchers, which we might be running in the future. We'll just have to see how the drivetrain holds up to bigger power. Behind that wheel, you see we have metal hexes. These hexes are different from what we saw on the brushed Groms and the brushless Groms. They are metal and they're held in with a grub screw, but they're not the same machined aluminum we saw on the previous upgraded axles. However, the way those hexes mount hint to the fact that even though this is a brushed Grom, the axles and most of the drivetrain aren't the same as what we've seen before. I think the amount of changes they've made to this platform are really interesting. I'm not sure if this represents a new design language that we're going to see on all Groms going forward or not, but there are definitely some new parts on this drivetrain that I think most people would love to see on the other brushed Groms. With those tires off, we can see some parts that look fairly familiar and some other parts that are completely different. For instance, this chassis is far more narrow than what we've seen on previous versions. The wheelbase is a little bit longer than what we saw on the Granite Grom and a little bit shorter than what we saw on the Typhon Grom. It also has a more high center of gravity shape to it, meaning this is designed to be a monster truck more than any other Grom we've seen before. And that's supported by the fact that it has some monster truck detailing here on the side. This is designed to look like a standard tube frame on a full-size monster truck, and I think it looks really neat. One thing I think might be controversial is this tub shape inside. This could easily collect a lot of debris, and I'm curious to see just how bad it's going to get when we bash it. Surprisingly, these body posts are removable, and while I'm taking them off is a great time to get subscribed because we've got another 50K giveaway in this video that you're going to want to win. And if you're excited to see what's inside this truck, make sure you hit that thumbs up, and when it turns into a hype button, give this video some hype points. With these off, we can see why they're a separate part. As with most Groms, this entire chassis is a single piece, which means it's a single injection molded piece. Injection molds are typically designed as two halves that come together, or possibly a more complicated design. But that means when everything comes apart, the piece needs to be able to come out of it. And this little hook feature here would make that a lot more difficult. They did give us a locating tab here on the bottom, which goes into the chassis and makes sure you can only put the mount in one way. This is a really nice design touch and something they didn't have to do, but something they did do so we don't install that part backwards. Hanging off the back of the truck is a brand new wheelie bar with some interesting design choices as well. These wheelie bar tires are a soft rubber, which is unusual because most minis use hard plastic tires. That means these should last longer, though I don't think they used bearings inside. And no, there are no bearings in here, nor are there any provision for bearings, but that's fine for a small car like this. They're held together on this common axle, and that axle runs through a slot in the injection molded piece, which actually then runs through a hole in this rubber piece. This is really, really cool, because in a rear impact, which happens all the time, this will actually move in the slot, and the rubber provides a cushion for it. I don't think I've ever seen this design on another RC car, and it's really interesting. Another interesting thing we're seeing here is pre-applied thread locker. Arrma doesn't typically use this, and I think it's the first time I've ever seen it on one of their cars. The nice thing about pre-applied thread locker is it's very consistent, and you don't end up in a situation where some screws have way too much and others don't have nearly enough. This is something Traxxas has been doing for a long time, and it's good to see other manufacturers picking this up as well. Overall, between the rubber tires and the rubber suspension, this thing's going to provide a lot of cushion that most wheelie bars simply don't offer. Very nice. These shocks are a similar design to what we've seen on the other brushed Groms, though there is one really big difference. On other brushed Grom models, the top screw is a separate piece and goes through a ball in the top cap. With this, they've changed that to a single piece design that should be quite a bit stronger and should lead to better durability. As far as I can tell, everything else about this shock is the same design as we've seen before. It does use preload spacers to set ride height, and inside I'm assuming we're going to see the same emulsion style shock cap. Yep, on a small truck like this, it doesn't really make that much difference, though these O-rings do seal well, and overall these plastic shocks hold up pretty well on the smaller vehicles. Of course, the taller the shock, the inherently weaker it is, so whether or not these shock shafts are going to hold up or they're going to get bent is something we're going to see when we bash it. The shock feels nice and smooth and reasonably filled with oil. I really do love seeing these little touch updates like this, and it is continuing to support my idea that this isn't just a new model, but kind of a new version. Similar to other vehicles like the Granite Grom, the shock tower is integrated into the chassis, but that's where the similarities end. We've got integrated shock protectors here, and there's a removable reinforcement brace behind where the wheelie bar goes that the screws go through for extra strength. Seeing things like this always makes me wonder if this was the design choice to begin with, or if they found a weakness and added this later. The integrated shock towers have been considered a design weakness, especially on the Typhon Grom where they're exposed, as they don't really have any support behind them, and if it breaks, you have to replace the entire chassis. They are fairly inexpensive, but it is kind of a pain to do. I suspect that's not something we're going to be dealing with on the Quake Grom, because the shock towers are mounted into this giant rail that goes all the way from the front to the back on both sides. And in order for this shock tower to break, this whole thing would have to break. I don't think that's going to be happening. One thing I noticed is that while the wheelie bar only uses 4 screw holes, there are actually 6 in this rear shock tower. Whenever I see extra holes like this, it makes me think something else might be coming that's going to use those holes. Let me know down in the comments if you know what that might be. Flipping this over, the rear skid uses the same 4 screw mounting design as all other Groms. These arms are the exact same arms off the Typhon Grom, which means they're pretty wide for a monster truck. The arm hinge pins look identical to what we've seen before, and in the rear we have standard Grom dog bones. Though out here at the hub you can see we actually have steel stub shafts, which is something we haven't seen on other brushed Groms. The really interesting stuff, however, is going to be under this cover. And it's not the longer screws. They've been using these for a while, though they weren't on the original Granite Grom. No, what's really interesting is this differential because it's a brand new part number. Though externally this does look a lot like the 223S diffs. We've got steel output cups, a steel ring gear, obviously sealed bearings on both sides. So whatever's making this a new part number must be on the inside. Popping the top reveals, it definitely appears to just be the 223S or upgraded differential in here. I can feel there's a seal in here, so this is definitely a sealed diff. There is fluid in it, so it's a fluid-filled diff. It's using all metal gears inside and a metal cross. And I'll be honest, I'm not exactly sure what's causing this to have a new part number. This looks identical to the 223S differentials and identical to the upgraded differentials you could buy for the brushed Groms. As you can see though, by this ARA 3067, this is definitely a new part number. Of course, there is one surefire way to know if it's different or not. Externally, the two do look identical. And then pulling this apart, yeah, on the inside, they look exactly the same as well. I wonder if maybe this has a different thickness fluid in it, or if the change is more subtle. Let me know if you see a difference that I'm missing. Because as far as I can tell, in spite of the new part number, this is identical to the upgraded 223S sealed differentials. And that's a good thing, especially for big power and big tires. One other thing we can verify while we have the Typhon 223S apart is that yes, they appear to be using the exact same dog bones. So that means the arms are definitely the same length as well. Speaking of platform parts interchanging, it looks like the rear bumper for the Quake could make a good upgrade for the Typhon. I think it'll be a direct replacement, and it's a little bit bigger, which should offer better protection. And speaking of similarities, just like with the other Groms, so far this thing's proving very easy to work on, but let me get the back end put back together, and let's see if things get more difficult inside this new tub. With everything back together, you can really see the suspension on that wheelie bar. This is an interesting design. Another really interesting design is just how narrow this chassis is. It's really only a little bit more than half the width of the Typhon Grom chassis, and due to that reduced width, the included 1400 milliamp hour 2S battery actually goes in on edge. It slides down in, and then the two tabs close on top of it. This is really convenient for the included battery, but it's probably going to be very inconvenient for any other battery you want to use that isn't this exact same size. And this is the first thing I've seen on this that I'm really not a fan of. Another big change is how the electronics are set up. On the bottom here, there are no screws for the servo mount, which means everything's mounted to this central spine. And with the removal of all of that spine screws, they give you two handy pull tabs, which removes the entire electronics module as one unit. This unit is really convenient to take out of there, and actually probably easier to work with than the other Groms, but one limitation I'm seeing right off the bat is the fact that this screw boss and associated plastic is going to limit motor length. That limitation means we're probably going to have to do some modification to it when we go full EXB spec on this truck, but it shouldn't be a problem for what's in here. This is an interesting little kit that gives you everything you need to upgrade a Grom to brushless. You get the motor, the ESC, motor mount, servo mount, transmitter, and receiver. I'm not actually sure what parts of this kit will and will not fit on here, but we're gonna find out. Of course, before we do any upgrades, we need to see how this thing runs stock, and out of the box, this has a brushed motor that we've seen in plenty of other Groms. It does have a heatsink with a fan on it, which we haven't seen on any other brushed Groms. Typically, the fan will be behind it here. We've got the same familiar 2-in-1 2S ESC, and the same SX110 servo with servo saver. Below that, we've got a familiar hex steel center drive shaft with a 61-tooth steel spur gear. And then in the front, everything looks similar to the back. We've got the same steel CVDs we saw in the 223S vehicles, that same differential that appears to be the same as the 223S but has a new part number, and the same integrated shock tower that has those braces going all the way from the front to the back, which should make it really, really strong. I do want to say this chassis is extremely stiff, and the way this is designed means I would be very surprised if we ever saw one of these chassis break, especially on stock power. In the front, we have a bumper that's very similar to the rear bumper, though slightly larger. This is something that could be upgraded for heavy bashing as well. In the box, along with the included battery, we also get a USB charger, some basic tools, the owner's manual, the standard SLT2 transmitter, which is labeled Quake. This is really nice to see, especially if you have a bunch of transmitters, and a technical pack, which tells you how to take it apart, gives you your gearing options, and an exploded view diagram. All right, guys, enough talk. Let me get this thing slammed back together. I want to see how it performs. All right, 2S battery loaded up. We're gonna start with a speed run, as is tradition. I'm not expecting big numbers here, given that this is a brushed Grom. Speaking of big numbers, the giveaway we're gonna be doing is gonna be for $200. I'll tell you where to in a little bit, but you're definitely gonna wanna enter it, so stay tuned for more information on that. And this thing runs just about how I expect it to. It's actually very smooth, very composed, but definitely not very fast. Let's get one more speed run out of it. Full throttle. Yeah, it doesn't feel too bad. Let's see what we got. 19 miles an hour, yeah, that's pretty much what I was expecting. As far as acceleration, it can easily do a wheelie, and I think that's probably what this thing is tuned for. It's got that 13-tooth pinion, and it's gonna be designed for doing stunts, wheelies, and things like that. Although I will say, even on this solid surface, it's very stable, and having that narrow chassis with all of the weight in the center is gonna help with that. And to be honest with you, this thing feels like one of the more stable little monster trucks I've ever felt, and it feels really, really good, even in this high traction situation. Moving over to some smoother dust-covered asphalt, we get a little bit more slide out of it, but due to its lack of power, it tends to want to push when you turn it rather than kick the back end out. It doesn't really want to do a donut, though we can definitely give it a little bit of gas and it will do a wheelie, though not as good of a wheelie here as we were getting on the other asphalt because it just doesn't have as much traction. Overall though, again, it really doesn't want to flip over, which I'm surprised for given that this is a high center of gravity monster truck. Once the terrain gets looser, that's where I'm expecting this thing to really shine, and it is where it's starting to shine. This thing is obviously designed to be run off-road, and even though it does get good traction, good bite, and feels good on-road, once you get to some more loose surfaces, it really starts feeling a lot more fun. And the fact that it can only do 19 miles an hour kind of goes away when you're just playing around in a really small area like this, which is what these small cars are designed for. So far, the suspension feels well tuned. It's handling some small bumps pretty well. It's not getting uncomposed over those little grass humps in the middle. And yeah, this feels pretty darn decent. Once we start getting into this larger gravel, it really does tend to show the weakness of suspension on these minis. Sometimes they can handle it and sometimes they can't. This one seems to be doing pretty well. It is bouncing around a little bit, but it's still staying composed. And even though this thing doesn't have a gyro or any kind of stability control, it's handling this very unscaled terrain really surprisingly well, and I'm happy to see that it is. And yeah, even though this is fairly low powered, it's handling the power really well, and it feels like a lot of fun even on this pretty heavy terrain. Did get a little bit of a flip over there, but that's the first flip over on it, and I'm pretty impressed so far. Now we're getting into some stuff that's completely inappropriate for these little cars. I have seen other minis have a really hard time in this area, and to be honest with you, this thing is just taking it. Some of these rocks are taller than the tires themselves, and even though, again, this doesn't have the most power in the world, it's using the power it does have really, really well, and this thing is incredibly composed, especially for a high center of gravity monster truck. We did just get a flip there, but again, the terrain is way out of scale on this, and it feels really, really nice. I think this thing's gonna be fun. Now, speaking of not to scale, these ruts are as tall as the truck is, and it's actually handling them really well too. It's treating them as little jumps instead of getting stuck in them. Of course, being four-wheel drive, that definitely helps. But this suspension is tuned absolutely awesome, and it feels so good. With its top speed of 19 miles an hour, you're not going fast anyway. Of course, we are going to be putting that brushless system in just a minute, and then hopefully it'll go a little bit faster. But again, for what this thing is, it's handling things so well. Look at that. It didn't even try to flip over, and that's pretty rare for a little car like this. It is incredibly composed, and I'm really surprised. It's wide, but it's also tall, and it feels really good. All right, let's try to really upset it by going full throttle over these whoops. Full throttle, and it just handles it. No problem whatsoever. Yeah, this thing's awesome. Okay, we did get it to finally flip. Since it's upside down, let's go ahead and see just how much dust and dirt has accumulated inside the chassis. This is something I'm concerned about. The body does come right off, which is nice, even with all this fine sand. And inside, actually, it's not that bad. Moving over to this grass, which is way too thick for it. Again, I'm really, really surprised. Is it going fast? No. Is it handling it? Yes. This is probably the most versatile small truck I've ever driven. Obviously, bigger trucks can handle more, but I've seen other small trucks like this not be able to handle grass like this, and this thing is just eating it up. It's really, really impressive. And whereas I don't expect it to have the wheel speed to do a backflip, let's see how it jumps. Yeah, it does little jumps pretty well. Let's give it with a bit more speed. Try full throttle on this one. Yeah, it does little scale jumps just fine. Again, with only a 19 mile an hour top speed, we're not going to be getting huge air out of this thing, and it doesn't have the wheel speed to do a backflip. But like I said, I'm not surprised with that. I wasn't expecting it, and it's just not what this little guy is designed to do. But for little jumping in small areas, it does absolutely fine. Lands composed, no problem whatsoever. Something like how a car feels is always really difficult to convey over video, but I have to say, so far I'm very impressed with how this car feels. I am happy to say that even when really dusty, these tabs don't seem to get bound up like some other cars do, and overall this truck definitely feels like it bashes bigger than it actually is. Arrma's been doing a really good job with tuning lately, so I'm not really surprised, but I am happy about it. I think this platform can definitely handle some more power, and given the drivetrain, I think it's designed to handle some more power. So now, more power is exactly what we're gonna give it. While I was looking for brushless options on Amazon, I came across this RC all-wheel drive kit. And what's unique about this kit is it gives you everything you need to go brushless, including the adapter for the battery and the transmitter and receiver. I've never used this kit before, and so far I'm kind of having mixed feelings about it. This transmitter feels okay, though not fantastic. But let's get it installed and see how it works. I did have the drivetrain seize up on me momentarily when I was driving in that deep sand. It freed up pretty quickly, but I'm worried there might be some sand stuck inside here. And yeah, there is a little bit, but it doesn't look too bad. It might have just been a fluke. This kit, which was about 70 bucks, comes with this 2 and 3S ESC, a 4000 kV motor with that battery adapter, a bunch of pinions, and an adjustable motor mount. That's really nice to see. And then a replacement ESC and servo mount, given that the stock ESC has a servo mount built into it. I'm not sure this is going to fit though. Start off by getting all this stuff unplugged. Of course, the reason why we have to put a different transmitter and receiver in here is because the stock receiver is built into the stock ESC. That's something that a lot of people don't like on these. So on these smaller vehicles, it's not that big of a deal. On previous version Groms, this mount went directly into the chassis, but it does appear as though the mount itself is the same, which is a really good sign. And yes, it does look like this upgraded aluminum mount will fit, so that means pretty much all these aftermarket ones should fit as well. And being the same servo from the other Groms, it fits perfectly too. And now a bit of a hot take, I didn't put thread locker on these screws even though they're going into aluminum because they're going through plastic. I find the plastic deforms when you tighten it up and it acts to lock the screw in. Obviously, better safe than sorry. If you want to apply thread locker on aluminum, do it. But I found when you're going through plastic, it usually isn't necessary. And now for the motor and motor mount, we run into our first incompatibility, and that's the fact that these new mounts are actually thinner than the old mounts were. So this adjustable mount's not going to work. Given that the motor shafts are the same diameter, we can just go ahead and use this mount with the stock pinion, though unfortunately that does remove our ability to adjust the speed for the new system. One thing I noticed while taking this off is this motor is already extremely crunchy, and I think this is actually where the lockup came from. I don't know if you can hear that, but it's pretty bad, and that's one of the downsides to these brush motors. The cans are open to the elements, and when you get crap in there, they tend to get messed up pretty quickly. Now, the last thing I want to check is whether or not this heatsink and fan are going to fit. While I'm swapping this over, let me tell you about the giveaway. In our next video, we're going to be going full EXB spec with a Castle system and a bunch of other upgrades, and Castle's been kind enough to be part of today's giveaway by offering one of you guys a $200 gift card to buy anything on their site. This fits, so this is going to work, and for one of you guys, 200 bucks is going to work to buy something awesome from Castle. In order to win, there's just a few things you need to do. First, make sure you're subscribed, like the video, and if you really enjoyed it, once you hit that like button, you should see some hype points. You can give those to the video as well. And then finally, just make sure you put any comment down in the comments section. As long as you're subscribed, we'll be picking a winner really soon. I almost forgot, because of the way this is designed, we need to put the servo on before we put that in. And putting that in, I did find one major difference. The holes on this plate are shorter than these screws are, and the kit doesn't come with shorter screws for it. Fortunately, I do have shorter screws I can use, but it is something to keep in mind. Something that's really important for you to keep in mind is that I announce giveaway winners in community posts, and if you haven't hit that bell to get notified of future videos after subscribing, you might miss finding out that you won, which has happened. All right, that sounds nice and smooth. So now I just need to mount up the ESC using the included double-sided tape, figure out where to put this massive receiver, wire everything up, and this thing is ready to rip. Let's go see if we can't beat that 19 miles an hour. Okay, the stock gearing and the stock battery means the speed we get is the speed we're stuck with for now. Let's see if that speed's any faster than 19 miles an hour. Oh, it's definitely got more pep, that's for sure. I think we're gonna be getting more than 19 out of it. Brakes are pretty sensitive. The ESC doesn't feel super sophisticated. I've definitely felt worse though. Not a ton of lag on it. It's got some good off the line pep. All right, let's bring that in and see if we got any faster. Doing some good wheelies there. And 24 miles an hour. Yep, that's faster than 19. Let's see how it bashes. Obviously, being on grass, it's at a little bit of a disadvantage, but it certainly feels a lot more lively than it did before. We've got these piles of fresh mulch where some stumps were. Seems to be handling those really, really well. And I have to say again, especially given how small this car is, it does handle rough terrain very, very well. These Chevron tires are a classic, and they're holding up just as well as I expected them to. Those piles of mulch are pretty fun. And yeah, the extra power feels great. Now don't forget, this thing can also do 3S. Let me know if you want to see me try this on 3S before we switch to the big system in the full EXP video that's coming next. But even on 2S, it's got way more spunk than it did with the stock brush system. Not quite enough power to self-right, but is it enough power to go off the big jump? Let's find out. Get her lined up, here we go. Full throttle, oh yeah. And it lands it pretty well. Obviously the suspension's working really hard when we're getting 6 or 7 feet up in the air, but it seems to handle it not bad. Oh, still can't quite get that backflip though. I think 3S and some bigger, heavier tires are definitely gonna get us into backflip territory because we're already pretty close. just can't quite get there. The tires are very, very lightweight on this thing, and the whole truck's pretty light, and we're just not getting the wheel speed we need, but it is handling the jumps well, landing them well, and nothing's broken so far. We'll also be doing a really rough durability test in the next video. I don't want to break it yet because I want to see how it's going to do on 4S, but for now, just normal bashing, it seems to be handling it just fine, and there's no surprise there because most of the drivetrain is stuff that we already are familiar with and stuff that we know is durable, and that new chassis is an absolute tank. And yeah, to be honest with you, I'm pretty surprised with this little RC all-wheel drive system. It didn't fit in there perfectly, not all the parts fit, but that's not their fault. It wasn't designed for this truck, but enough parts fit to make it work, and it definitely gives it a bit more pep, and for about 70 bucks, I don't think it's that bad of a deal. Speaking of which, let's go talk about the price on this thing. Because no matter how cool something is, price is always important, and this truck, in its brushed form, is gonna be 190 bucks. Is that a lot of money? To be honest with you, these days, I genuinely don't know. The prices of things have been changing so quickly, and this hobby especially has gotten hit really hard with things we must not mention. And given the current state of things, 190 bucks doesn't really seem that bad, especially since you're already getting a full brushless ready drivetrain. Of course, switching to brushless isn't gonna be the cheapest thing in the world. This all-in-one setup here is about 70 bucks, and it does work pretty well. I am excited to see what it does on 3S in the next video. There are cheaper ways to do it, and of course there are more expensive ways to do it. As far as this truck itself is concerned, I think this is the best Grom they've ever made. In spite of the fact that they basically built a bathtub here, not that much debris gets into it. I didn't even blow this out after that last session. It is an incredibly strong design. I'd be surprised if anyone ever breaks one of these chassis. And I think it represents the evolution of the platform. Even though Arrma isn't technically calling this a version 2, there's enough new and updated here that I think it is worth being called that. The biggest downside I see is this battery tray. As it stands with this clip design, if your battery isn't basically exactly the same size as the stock battery, it's not gonna fit. Of course, there are gonna be aftermarket solutions that come out. Right off the top of my head, I can think about putting a zip tie here and here and then just putting a strap over it, which is probably things we're gonna have to figure out in the next video when we go 4S. But they did it for a reason, and that's to keep the chassis more narrow, which allows for this twin support design and keeps a tight center of gravity, which makes it more stable. Overall, guys, I think this is a great truck. Whether or not it's worth almost $200 in brushed form, that's gonna be up to you. And I wanna hear from you down in the comments. Let me know what you think about the price. Let me know what you think about this truck. I mean, you're gonna be commenting anyway to get that $200 gift card from Castle. So let me know what you think and then check out one of these videos.